The man who abandons illusions transforms failure into learning and power into discipline, discovers that true freedom is born from the courage to face raw reality. Have you ever stopped to consider that perhaps the greatest enemy standing between you and your success was never the world, your circumstances, or even the people who crossed your path? What if I told you that the real obstacle was carefully planted within you from an early age, when you were taught to fear failure as if it were a death sentence? The truth is that the pain of defeat hurts not so much for its own sake, but because you were trained to believe it is proof of inability, a certificate that you weren't born to succeed, a final verdict against your dreams. This pain isn't natural, it's programmed. Since childhood, you've been conditioned to associate mistakes with shame, failure with humiliation, and a failed attempt with the label of failure. Think about how in school, every time you got an answer wrong, the whole class laughed. Think about how at home, oftentimes, failure was accompanied by scolding, cruel comparisons, and accusations of laziness or lack of talent. Failure is shaped to be an invisible enemy, a ghost that stifles every bold step you consider taking. But I need to confront you now. How many times have you failed to act, not because you lacked the ability, but because the fear of failure was greater than the will to try? How many projects, ideas, and relationships have you left behind simply because the possibility of pain paralyzed you before you even made the first move? This is how society keeps you inside a box, trapped in a vicious cycle of conformity and inertia. They didn't need to chain your feet. They simply taught your mind to refuse any risk. They created within you a self-sabotage mechanism so efficient that you build your own prison every day. If you look closely, you'll realize this prison has no iron bars or visible locks. It's made of painful memories, silent fears, and beliefs repeated until they become part of your body. If I fail, I'll disappoint my parents. If I fail, I'll be ridiculed. If I fail, I'll prove I was never good enough. These voices have become part of your internal dialogue, and without realizing it, you've begun to avoid any path that could jeopardize your image. Failure has become such a monster that most people prefer to shrink back, live in safety, and accept a mediocre life, rather than face the possibility of falling. But I ask you, what kind of life is this where someone chooses to die slowly of mediocrity, just to avoid the momentary pain of a fall? What logic makes someone believe that being consumed by paralysis is more tolerable than rising with scars and continuing to fight? Fear of failure has become the perfect excuse for inaction, and inaction is the slowest and cruelest poison there is. Think about the moments in your life when you felt truly alive. They weren't those when everything was safe and predictable, but those when you threw yourself into the unknown, even though you were afraid. The racing heart before an important presentation, the butterflies in your stomach before proposing your feelings to someone, the anxiety before a decision that could change everything. These are the moments when life truly pulses, because the possibility of losing is right there, right next to the possibility of winning. Society, however, taught you to avoid these moments. It told you it's better not to take risks, that it's wiser to choose the safe path, that it's smarter to be content with little. But what they call wisdom is just cowardice in disguise. Failure shouldn't be seen as an abyss, but as a stepping stone. It's not the end of the road, but the uneven terrain that forces you to strengthen the muscles of your journey. Every defeat is a message. Every failure is a hidden code that reveals where you still need to grow. The scar you carry isn't a sign of weakness. It's a reminder that you had the courage to fight. Yet they made you believe that falling once means you can't get back up again. That one mistake defines your entire identity. That one stumble is enough to destroy your dignity. Why do so many intelligent, talented, and ambitious people never achieve even a fraction of what they could? It's not a lack of opportunity. It's not a lack of ability. It's fear. Fear of trying and failing. Fear of facing judgment, ridicule, rejection. The fear of failure is the highest wall built around your potential. You can be surrounded by tools, brimming with resources, with energy and youth at your disposal. But if that wall isn't destroyed, you'll never see the other side. The pain of failure is just a symptom. The real problem is the meaning you've been taught to attribute to that pain. Think about it. When you cut your hand on a knife, the pain is useful because it alerts you to danger. But if you interpreted the pain as a sign that you should never use a knife again, you'd starve. The same thing happens with failure. Pain is just a sign that you tried. The problem is that you've been programmed to believe this pain is definitive, that it signifies incapacity, that it signifies condemnation. They've trained you to escape reality, to believe that life should be comfortable, and that any discomfort is a sign of failure. Now I challenge you. Could it be that your true prison isn't failure itself, but the interpretation you choose to give it? Could it be that what paralyzes you isn't the fall, but the fear of facing your own limitations without masks? Could it be that defeat hurts so much not because it's fatal, but because it forces you to see that you're not yet who you want to be? They want you to give up. They want you to accept the narrative that life is a game of chance, that some are born winners, and others are born to be losers. They want you to accept the role of spectator while a few command the stage. But what they'll never tell you is that the fear you feel can be transformed into your most powerful weapon. Fear is energy. It can paralyze you or it can propel you. It can be the weight that sinks you or the fire that makes you run faster. Every time you feel afraid of failure, you face a choice. You can run, hide, shrink, and continue living within the comfort zone that slowly kills you. Or you can move forward, face the butterflies in your stomach, feel the pain of the fall, and use that scar as fuel for the next battle. Fear is not the enemy. Cowardice is. Failure is not the end. Giving up is. And here's the truth no one dared tell you. Failure is inevitable. You will fail. You will lose. You will make mistakes. And that's wonderful, because every failure is a lesson. Every defeat is preparation. Every fall is a test that sharpens your mind and hardens your spirit. The true winner is not the one who never fails, but the one who has learned to use failure as a stepping stone to reach higher. Now look around you. How many people do you know who gave up too soon? How many settled into jobs they hated, relationships that destroyed them, routines that slowly killed their soul? They all have one thing in common. It wasn't life that defeated them. It was the fear of failure. They chose to live trapped in an invisible cage just to avoid feeling the shock of falling. But that's the greatest defeat of all, the defeat of never having fought. And I need you to understand something right now. When you feel fear, when your mind starts whispering that maybe it's better not to risk it, remember, this fear is not a signal to retreat. It's a signal to move forward. It's proof that you're right on the border between the life you have and the life you want. It's a warning that you're facing a choice that can transform you. Fear is the gate that separates ordinary people from the great strategists of existence itself. You no longer need to believe the lie that failure is a sign of inability. You don't need to carry the shame of having made mistakes. You don't need to shrink from laughter or criticism. Failure is simply a process. It doesn't define you, limit you, or condemn you. On the contrary, it reveals you, shapes you, and prepares you. And this is where your journey begins. Not when you finally win, not when everyone applauds, not when success arrives. Your journey begins precisely the moment you face failure head-on and decide it will no longer paralyze you. It's at that moment that you break the invisible chains that have held you back for years. It's at that moment that you transform from victim to strategist. Now, I ask you, will you continue to allow fear to dictate the limits of your life? Or will you have the courage to take the first step into the unknown? Will you choose to be a slave to your programming? Or will you start using failure as fuel to achieve everything you've ever wanted? Take a deep breath and look within yourself. Feel the truth burning in the depths of your mind. Fear has never been your enemy. Failure has never been your executioner. They have always been signs that you are alive, that you dared, that you tried. And if you still doubt, I tell you, there is no prison more cruel than the one you build in your own mind. And there is no freedom more powerful than the one that begins when you embrace falling as an inevitable part of the path. So choose. Choose between safe mediocrity or risky greatness. Choose between dying slowly in silence or living intensely, even with scars. Because in the end, the only true defeat is never having tried. And remember, if you're afraid of failing, it's because there's something great waiting on the other side. Fear is just confirmation that you're on the right path. They've always told you that positive thinking is the key to life, that keeping a smile on your face attracts good things, that all you have to do is believe in the best for the best to happen. But tell me honestly, how many times have you believed this and still seen your life go nowhere? How many times have you tried to keep your head up, repeated motivational phrases, written goals on colorful paper, stuck notes on your mirror with affirmations of success, but deep down, you knew none of that changed the harsh reality that remained before you. How many times have you smiled when you wanted to scream, given thanks when you wanted to cry, forced yourself to believe that everything would work out even though you knew the situation didn't depend solely on your faith? The truth, no one has the courage to say, is that this poison disguised as hope is one of the most effective traps they've created to control you. Since childhood, you've been bombarded with messages telling you not to look at the shadows, not to acknowledge the harsh side of life, not to confront obstacles realistically, but instead to take refuge in an optimistic fantasy. Think positively. Everything will work out. Don't talk about problems, talk about solutions. Don't give space to negativity because it attracts bad things. With these simple phrases, they taught you to escape reality and believe in a glass bubble that sooner or later will shatter before your eyes. And when the bubble bursts, when reality imposes itself with all its brutality, you feel even worse. As if the pain of failure weren't enough, you also carry the guilt of not having been positive enough. After all, if life didn't work out, it's your fault, isn't it? It wasn't because the system is unfair, because people are cold, because the world doesn't work as promised. It was because you didn't believe enough. That's how they reinforce the chain. They turn you into an accomplice in your own prison. How many times have you witnessed this in your daily life? A friend lost their job and was told by everyone to stay positive, as if optimism alone would pay the bills. A betrayed woman was advised to believe it happened because something better was coming, as if the pain of humiliation could simply be dissolved in pretty phrases. A young man riddled with self-help books and decided to believe the universe was conspiring in his favor, but didn't lift a finger to learn about finances, negotiate interest rates, or create strategies. The result? He sank even deeper. Positive thinking is sold as a magic potion, but it works like a cheap anesthetic. It relieves the pain for a moment, but it doesn't cure the disease. Perhaps you've felt this shock before. That moment when, after mentally repeating that everything will be okay, the exact opposite happens. You wait for the promotion that never comes. You believe in the relationship that falls apart. You bet on luck that never shows up. And when the inevitable happens, when the world shows its raw face, you feel the pain multiplied. Because beyond the fall, there's the betrayal of illusion. Why does this happen? Because positive thinking doesn't prepare you for reality. It disarms you before it. It sends you into the field without armor, without strategy, trusting only in the faith that your enemies will be moved by your smile. But the world doesn't bow to your hope. The world doesn't respect the naive. The world doesn't operate according to the logic of divine justice in every detail. The world operates according to the logic of force, strategy, and adaptation. Think of a soldier who goes to war believing he doesn't need training because the energy of the universe will protect him. What happens? He's the first to fall. Now think about yourself. How many times have you entered a personal, professional, or emotional battle believing only that it will work out, without analyzing the terrain, mapping the risks, or preparing for the worst? How many times has the shock been devastating because you surrendered unarmed? They want you to keep believing this, because then you become easy to control. A worker who believes their effort will be recognized, even if the company never appreciates it, remains obedient, waiting for the reward that never comes. A citizen who believes justice always prevails, accepts being crushed by the system, because he prefers to believe that everything works out in the end. A man who believes that being kind to everyone guarantees respect continues to be exploited by more cunning people, because he doesn't understand that kindness without strategy is weakness. And here's the cruelest point. This illusion is comfortable. It's easier to believe that simply smiling will make life better than to face the reality that you'll need to change your attitude, your discipline, your strategy. It's easier to repeat cliches than to sit alone and calmly analyze what's really destroying your results. It's easier to cling to a sweet illusion than to swallow the bitter truth. But have you ever realized that too much sweetness is poisonous? That the same illusion that comforts you today can be the rope that hangs you tomorrow? Perhaps that's why so many people live frustrated, even when they consume tons of motivational content. They get addicted to the momentary relief of impactful phrases, but remain fragile when reality knocks on the door. Look at what's happening on social media. Thousands of people share optimistic messages every day, Phrases that seem profound but ultimately say nothing. Be the best version of yourself. Everything happens for a reason. Believe in your dreams. These are beautiful but empty words because they offer no tools, no strategy, no preparation. It's like giving a lollipop to someone who's hungry and telling them the hunger will pass. It passes for a moment, but soon returns even more intense. Now imagine what it would be like if, instead of running away from reality, you started facing it head-on. Imagine how your life would change if, instead of numbing yourself with positive phrases, you started asking uncomfortable questions. Why haven't you achieved what you want yet? Where are your blind spots? What habits are sabotaging your results? What truths do you refuse to accept? These questions may be painful, but they are the only path to freedom, because deep down, you know. You know it wasn't just bad luck that kept you from going further. You know it wasn't just because it wasn't meant to be. You know it was often a lack of preparation, courage, and vision. And society doesn't want you to acknowledge this. Because when you embrace this truth, you stop being a victim and start being a strategist. I know it's hard to hear this. It's hard to realize that for years you believed in an illusion carefully constructed to keep you docile. It's hard to acknowledge that you wasted time and energy nurturing hopes that were never enough to move the gears of your life. But it's this shock that awakens. It's this awakening that separates those who remain asleep in a collective trance from those who decide to take control. And this is where the turning point begins. Because while most people run away from reality, you will learn to use it as a weapon. While most people repeat empty mantras, you will learn to build concrete strategies. While most people prefer to believe that everything happens by chance, you will learn that nothing happens without preparation. You've been fooled into believing that positivity is synonymous with strength, but true strength isn't closing your eyes and smiling into the abyss. True strength is opening your eyes, facing the abyss, and learning to build a bridge. True strength is having the courage to see what no one wants to see, to say what no one wants to hear, to face what everyone prefers to ignore. And here's the big question that will echo in your mind until the next stage. Are you willing to shatter the illusions that have always comforted you and finally see life as it is? Are you willing to abandon the deceptive sweetness of ready-made phrases to taste the liberating bitterness of truth? Because illusion may protect you from discomfort for a time, but it also protects you from growth. And if you continue to embrace these lies, you'll live trapped in a cycle of empty hopes and constant frustration. But if you have the courage to let go of the poison disguised as medicine, you'll discover that reality, however harsh, is the only solid foundation on which to build true power. And when that penny drops, you'll never see life the same way again. Have you ever noticed how most people live as if they're wearing colored glasses to see the world? They believe they see reality, but what they see is an edited version, shaped by their own desires, fears, and illusions. When they look at a difficult situation, they don't see what's actually in front of them, but what they wish were true. This is why so many deceive themselves in relationships, in business, in life's most crucial choices. Self-deception is comfortable, but it's also the poison that slowly corrodes any chance of victory. Machiavelli knew this, and that's why he wrote so coldly. He wasn't concerned with warming hearts or offering hope. He was interested in teaching people to see things as they really are. This is the brutal vision of reality, not the one you wish existed, but the one that actually imposes itself. And what happens when someone finally removes their colored lenses? The first sensation is almost unbearable. It's like leaving a dark room and facing intense sunlight. Your eyes burn, your body recoils, your mind rejects it. Seeing the stark truth is painful because it dismantles all the stories you've told yourself to feel safe. It's uncomfortable to admit that you lost not because the universe is unfair, but because you misjudged the battlefield. It's humiliating to realize that the person you thought loved you was never who they pretended to be, but a cold strategist looking out for their own interests. It's suffocating to understand that your career stalled not because of a lack of recognition, but because you hid behind mediocrity, while others took the risks you avoided. And here arises the first inevitable question. Are you prepared to see things as they truly are, without the veil of justifications and the numbness of self-deception? Because if you aren't, you'll continue repeating the cycle of defeat and consoling yourself with false explanations. But if you are, you'll have in your hands the most powerful weapon a man can possess: vision. This vision is cruel, but it's liberating. It shows that failure isn't punishment, it's a result. It shows that love isn't a guarantee of fidelity, it's a momentary choice. It shows that hard work isn't a passport to success, it's just one variable in a much larger equation. Those who see reality unadorned become immune to disappointment because they stop expecting the world to function according to their fantasies. And that's precisely where true strength is born, in the radical acceptance of what is. Think about how you've been betrayed by your own expectations. You trusted someone too much and were disappointed. You believed that all it took was effort and were frustrated. You thought you'd be loved simply for being loyal, only to be discarded. Each of these experiences hurt not only because of what happened, but because you expected things to be different. But what if, from the beginning, you'd seen things as they were? What if you'd noticed the signs that were there, clear as day, but that you refused to read? And the question that echoes now, how much pain in your life could have been avoided if you had opened your eyes earlier? A brutal vision is not pessimism. It's not living without faith, without joy, without trust. It's living with lucidity. It's understanding that each person has their own interests, that each system has its flaws, that each opportunity hides risks. It's abandoning the comfort of naivete to embrace the responsibility of clarity. A leader cannot afford to live in illusions. They need to see before others, deeper than others, further than others. And this clarity requires courage, because by seeing things as they are, you discover not only the truth about the world, but also about yourself. You may realize that you're not as disciplined as you thought, that your excuses are nothing more than cowardice, that your kindness was often just fear, disguised as virtue. This revelation can be devastating, but it's also the first step toward rebuilding, because only those who face themselves with brutal honesty have a chance to truly evolve. Have you ever had the feeling that your entire life could change if you had the courage to look in the mirror without filters? Imagine for a moment what it would be like if you began to approach each situation the way a military strategist analyzes the battlefield. He doesn't ask whether the enemy is just or unjust. He doesn't care if the terrain is beautiful or ugly. He doesn't complain if it rains on the day of battle. He observes. He measures forces. He analyzes resources. He identifies strengths and weaknesses, and only then does he act. The same should happen in your life. There's no point in complaining that people aren't loyal. What matters is understanding who is an ally and who is a threat. There's no point hoping for your career to advance based on merit. What matters is recognizing which movements truly generate influence. Are you willing to treat your life as a battlefield? Or will you continue to believe that the world will adjust to your goodwill? This is where Machiavelli becomes more relevant than ever. He said that the first virtue of a leader is the ability to see things as they are. This skill is rare because it requires a cool head. Most people prefer to see what they would like to see. They prefer to believe that people are good, that justice is natural, that fate is fair. But the minority that accepts this brutal view of reality gains a huge advantage. They stop being pawns and start moving the pieces. And here lies the revelation few can bear. You don't lose because the world is cruel. You lose because you refuse to see the world as it is. This refusal is your greatest weakness. It's what makes you easy prey for those who already understand the rules of the game. Do you have the courage to admit that many of your defeats did not come from the malice of others, but from your own blindness? When you understand this, something changes within you. Fear diminishes, because you realize it's not fate that brings you down, but your misreading of the situation. If you failed, it's because you misdiagnosed. If you lost, it's because you misjudged. It hurts, but it's liberating. Because if the mistake was yours, the solution is also within you. You don't need to wait for the world to change. You just need to change your perspective. And in that moment, you realize that reality is not your enemy, but your greatest ally. Because it's only by looking the facts in the eye that you find the weapons to win. Every criticism, every failure, every disappointment stops being a source of shame and becomes valuable data for adjusting your strategy. And here I ask you, how long will you waste precious data out of fear of facing the truth they carry? A brutal vision of reality is like a double-edged sword. It can wound deeply, but it's also the only one capable of cutting the chains of illusion. Most people cling to illusion because they believe it protects them from pain. But what they don't realize is that illusion doesn't protect, it imprisons. It creates a false sense of security that crumbles upon first impact. Would you rather live in a comfortable bubble that could burst at any moment, or in a solid fortress built on the rock of truth? The answer to this question defines not only your mindset, but the destiny of your life. Because those who continue to believe in illusions are inevitably destroyed by them. Those who learn to see reality unadorned gain an advantage that no external power can take away: clarity. And perhaps this is the most uncomfortable, yet also the most powerful lesson. Your greatest weakness isn't the world's evil, but your own refusal to see how it works. The moment you break this cycle, you begin to transform. And this is where the suspense intensifies. Because now that you've grasped the importance of brutal insight, the inevitable question is, what will you do with this knowledge? Will you use clarity to strategize, or will you let yourself be crushed by the weight of the truth? Will you become predator or remain prey? No one can give you that answer, but know this: the time to choose has come. Have you ever noticed how some people seem to have their lives marked by luck, while others carry the constant weight of adversity? Some attribute this to fate, karma, divine blessing, or even curse. But the truth, which Machiavelli saw centuries ago, is much simpler and at the same time much more brutal. There is no luck that can last without preparation, and there is no absolute bad luck that can bring down someone who knows how to manipulate circumstances. Fortune, as he described it, is a raging river that changes course without warning, sometimes calm, sometimes devastating. You can't stop the water from flowing, but you can build dikes, channels, and mechanisms that harness that force to your advantage. Virtue, it's your ability to act, adapt, and shape reality. It's the internal energy that transforms opportunity into achievement, chaos into order, disaster into learning. Consider how many times in human history, chance provided the initial spark, but it was the steady hand of the strategist that transformed chance into victory. Alexander the Great didn't conquer the world simply because he was born a prince. He studied, adapted techniques, absorbed knowledge from different cultures, and precisely planned every move of his troops. Birth gave him a starting point, but it was the virtue that multiplied their influence. Similarly, how many princes, kings, or magnates were born surrounded by wealth and lost it all within a few years due to an inability to respond to change? How many heirs squandered immense fortunes because they believed their wealth would last forever, forgetting that without discipline and preparation, any river overflows and destroys everything around it? And now the question you need to face: have you been living like someone who builds dikes, or like someone who just prays that the flood never comes? Life is full of everyday examples of this relationship. Think of the man who complains every day that he's never had any luck with jobs, but he's never learned a new skill. He waits for a promotion to fall from the sky, but he doesn't realize that his stagnation is the result of his own passivity. The opportunity may have presented itself, but he wasn't ready to seize it. On the other hand, consider the young man who prepares in silence, who studies when everyone else is resting, who observes when everyone else is distracted. He can't control when the opportunity will arise, but when it does, he's the only one with steady hands to grasp it. Outsiders might call this luck, but it's not luck. It's discipline combined with vision. Could this be the very blind spot that's been keeping you stuck? You're hoping life will improve, your relationship will work itself out, an opportunity will present itself, but what have you done to be ready when the tide changes? It's surprising to realize how the greatest triumphs often arise amid the most unlikely chaos. During the Black Death in Europe, while millions died, inventions, artistic works, and new forms of social organization also emerged that changed the continent's course. Disaster was not avoided, but those who managed to adapt transformed tragedy into a platform for renewal. Similarly, in the midst of World War II, while cities were being destroyed, innovations emerged that are now part of everyday life, from penicillin to technologies that would later be used in computers. This isn't romanticizing pain, but understanding that every misfortune conceals the possibility of transformation. But only the attentive and prepared can see it. And are you training your eyes to spot opportunities hidden behind fear and pain? Fear is the invisible barrier that separates ordinary people from those who dominate wealth. Most, faced with the unknown, become paralyzed. They retreat when life gets tough, flee when a crisis hits, cling to what they already know even when it's sinking. The few who move forward are seen as reckless, but in reality, they are the only lucid ones. because they know that every wave that threatens to wash them away can also be used as a boost to reach the other shore. That's why virtue is always more important than the fortune luck may offer, but only discipline can transform. Have you ever stopped to think that perhaps the moments when you suffered the most were precisely those when you were closest to discovering a strength that you had never used before? This is where an uncomfortable revelation comes in. If your life seems to be stuck, it's not because fortune hasn't looked your way, but because your virtue remains dormant. You haven't built dikes yet, haven't learned to redirect the water's force. You keep waiting for the river to change on its own, when in fact it should be shaping its banks. This is the difference between those who are carried and those who sail. How many times have you seen ordinary people without much resources create businesses from scratch and prosper, while others with all the money in the world fail? This is no coincidence. It's proof that fortune without virtue is like sand slipping through your fingers. And if you could start building your virtue today, no matter how small, in what area of your life would you start? The biggest mistake is believing that fortune can be controlled. No one can control the rain, the wind, the economy, politics, or everyday health. But everyone can prepare for when these elements change. Your mission is not to avoid change, but to create structures that turn it into an advantage. If the market falls, you must be prepared to buy cheap. If a relationship ends, you must have built an identity strong enough to withstand it. If illness strikes, you must have taken care of your health beforehand to withstand it more than the fragile body that never prepared itself. Isn't that exactly what separates the resilient from those who break at the first storm? It's impressive how this principle is repeated even in nature. Bamboo, for example, withstands extremely strong winds because it doesn't try to fight them. It bends, adapts, and when the wind passes, it returns to its upright position. Meanwhile, giant, hard, and inflexible trees fall easily when the storm is too strong. Bamboo's virtue lies in its flexibility, and this is what makes it nearly indestructible. Have you been a rigid tree or an intelligent bamboo in the face of the storms of your life? And here comes another detail that few realize. Fortune tests you when you least expect it. It's on the day you relax, when you get distracted, when you think everything is under control, that something unexpected happens. An accident, a layoff, a betrayal, a crisis. And in these moments, only those who have been silently preparing for it survive. Virtue. It is not built in the heat of battle, but in ordinary days, in silent training, in efforts that no one applauds. It is the disciplined routine that shapes the invisible warrior who, when the time comes, knows exactly what to do. Have you been training in silence or waiting to learn when it's too late? Look at the world, and you'll see signs everywhere. A casual conversation can be the gateway to a partnership. A failure can be the push to change paths. A criticism can be the key to discovering where you need to improve. But those who live numb to magical thinking don't see any of this. They wait for opportunity to come packaged in glitter, with a flashing neon sign. Meanwhile, the prepared seize what seems small and turn it into an empire. Haven't you been missing opportunities every day simply because you're still waiting for luck to arrive with a note that says, "I am the opportunity"? And herein lies the secret Machiavelli already intuited. Fortune is not your enemy. It is wild, unpredictable, but it can be tamed. Not by force, but by intelligence. Not by hope, but by discipline. Not by desire, but by action. You need not fear it. You must learn to dialogue with it, to anticipate its movements, to build solid margins. After all, haven't you been confusing the uncontrollable river of fortune with an impassable sea, when in fact it can move the mill that generates its own energy? This is where the narrative takes a turn, because if until now you believed that success depends on external circumstances, you've probably already realized you were wrong. Circumstances influence, but they don't determine. What determines is your ability to act on them. Virtue is the key that transforms chance into destiny. Without it, you're just another person tossed back and forth by the tides. With it, you become the engineer of your own fate. And here the inevitable question arises. Do you want to continue being a leaf carried by the wind, or are you willing to be a river that shapes the landscape? When this response matures within you, something irreversibly changes. You stop complaining about your luck, envying those who seem privileged, and lamenting crises. You begin to see signs everywhere. You begin to realize that every stumbling block can become a stepping stone. that every rejection can become an opportunity to reinvent yourself, that every storm can be used to clear the ground on which you will build something greater. And it is precisely at this point that the public, trapped in their own lives, needs to ask themselves, how long will I waste energy crying over luck that didn't come, instead of creating virtue to transform any circumstance into a weapon? The river of fortune will keep flowing with or without you. It doesn't wait, it doesn't pity, it doesn't change because you want it to. But you can decide now whether you'll be swept along or whether you'll build structures that will guide you. That choice is yours alone. And when you realize this, life will never feel the same again, because instead of being a victim of chance, you will become a master of adaptation. You were trained from an early age to believe that power is dangerous, that seeking influence is synonymous with selfishness, that assuming prominence is arrogance. You were told that good people don't seek power, that only the corrupt, the tyrants, and the cruel seek to rise. This narrative wasn't created by chance. It was carefully constructed so that you would never dare to stand up, never dare to take up space, never dare to be greater than the average life they reserved for you. But the truth is different. There is no full life without power. Power isn't a privilege, it's a necessity. Those who renounce it don't become virtuous, they become slaves. Think about how many times you've given in for fear of displeasing. How many times you said yes when you meant no. How many times you cowered before someone who shouted louder, not because they were better than you, but because you believed that being docile was the path to acceptance. How many times you allowed yourself to be exploited by colleagues, bosses, partners, even people you claim to love, just to avoid appearing harsh, just to avoid being accused of selfishness. But the consequence was never respect. The result was always the opposite. Every half-hearted concession was interpreted as weakness. Every time you bowed down, you lost value in the eyes of others. And here's the first twist you might never have considered. Kindness doesn't generate respect, it generates expectation. When you offer everything without limits, people don't applaud you, they test you. When you show a willingness to sacrifice yourself consistently, they don't put you on a pedestal, they put you down to step on whenever convenient. It's not because the world is evil, but because human nature sees weakness as an opportunity. Have you ever stopped to notice how in any group, there's always someone who guides, someone who makes decisions, someone who influences, even without an official position? And how there's also always someone who is ignored, who speaks and no one listens, who makes an effort and no one appreciates it. This doesn't happen by chance. The first projected power, the second renounced it. Power is not a title, it's not a position, it's not a crown. Power is the ability to make others react to you, not the other way around. It's the ability to set boundaries, to position yourself, to defend your space. And if you don't exercise that power, someone else will. The void is never empty. Where you don't assert yourself, someone else will. And here arises the question that needs to echo in your mind. How many areas of your life today are being dominated by others simply because you were afraid to take control? Perhaps you think that being loved is more important than being respected. This is the trap the naive fall into. Love is volatile, changing according to moods, interests, and circumstances. Today, you may be loved and tomorrow discarded, without warning, without explanation. Respect, however, is solid. Respect doesn't depend on affection, it depends on attitude. It's possible that someone may never like you, but they will assert themselves through your firmness. And it is precisely here that Machiavelli provokes us with one of his most controversial reflections. If a leader must choose between being loved or being feared, it is much safer to be feared. This doesn't mean being cruel, it means being solid. It means that respect cannot be negotiated, that one's position cannot be vulnerable to the moods of others. Have you ever noticed how those who laugh at the weak are silent in the face of those who know how to assert themselves? Now imagine your life as a chessboard. While you wait for people to like you, others move pieces strategically, calculating each step to expand their position. While you dream of being recognized, they build authority. While you hesitate to say no, they advance. And every space you vacate is occupied by someone bolder. Do you really believe you can build a great life without learning to project power? This is the turning point that separates the naive from the sovereign. Understanding that power is not optional, it is vital. And here comes a revelation that few can bear. Power is not dirty. Power is neutral, like a sword. Whoever wields it decides whether it will be a weapon of tyranny or protection. The error lies not in power, but in the cowardice of those who refuse to use it and then complain of being dominated. And how many times have you voluntarily disarmed yourself, believing that this would protect you, when in fact you were making yourself easy prey? The time has come to turn this game around. Power begins with self-discipline. There is no sovereignty without self-government. Those who cannot control their own emotions will always be slaves to the emotions of others. Those who do not keep their word will never inspire trust. Those who cannot control their impulses will be manipulated by those who know how to provoke. Power is built behind the scenes of your life, in silent habits, in consistent decisions, in the courage to maintain boundaries even when it costs dearly. And if you can't govern yourself, how do you expect to govern any situation around you? Projecting power isn't arrogance, it's presence. It's the energy you emit when you enter a room and are immediately noticed. You don't need to shout, you don't need to threaten. All it takes is a firm gaze, clarity of speech, and consistency in actions. People trust those who don't waver. They follow those who convey security. They respect those who know how to say no. And they avoid testing those who show that their limits are non-negotiable. Have you ever felt how the atmosphere changes when someone with true presence enters a space? In relationships, this rule is even more brutal. Many believe that to keep someone, you must always give in, always please, and adapt to their desires. But the truth is, no one respects someone who becomes a doormat. Love may exist for a time, but respect dissolves. And without respect, love itself degrades. True balance arises when you know how to set boundaries, when you know how to defend your dignity without hesitation. Love isn't about nullifying yourself. It's about being whole and still choosing to share. Have you been confusing love with submission and confusing kindness with lack of courage? Power must be wielded with precision. Be gentle when necessary, but ruthless when your space is invaded. Know how to remain silent when silence is strength, but speak when inaction is cowardice. Know how to strategically retreat, but attack when opportunity demands it. This is not manipulation, it is sovereignty. The Machiavellian prince is not an insane despot, but a lucid strategist who understands that power requires constant maintenance. And you, how are you taking care of the power you already possess? Have you watered it like a garden or let it dry out for fear of appearing harsh? Because power, like a garden, requires vigilance. Every day, temptations arise to return to being the good guy who pleases everyone. Fear of facing conflict, fear of being misunderstood, and anxiety about losing approval arise. But giving into these is a recipe for irrelevance. A leader is not defined by universal acceptance, but by the ability to sustain their position even under pressure. Have you ever noticed that every time you back down for fear of displeasing, you give up part of your territory? And here we come to a decisive revelation. Power is not permanent. It is not a fixed throne, but a constant dance. Today you have it, tomorrow you may lose it. This is why arrogance is the fatal flaw of weak leaders. They believe that the position they have achieved is definitive, but they forget that power is sustained by daily discipline and constant vigilance. Are you ready to accept that power is not a prize but a responsibility? This awareness changes everything, because when you understand that power isn't about being loved but about being respected, it's not about dominating but about maintaining boundaries. It's not about manipulating but about leading. You stop fearing it and start cultivating it. You stop shrinking and start projecting. You stop being a shadow and start being a presence. And it is precisely this transformation that paves the way for completion. Because if until now you have understood that failure is not the enemy, that illusion is poison, that brutal vision is liberating, and that virtue dominates fortune, now you must face the ultimate truth. Without power, all this knowledge is lost. Without power, your discipline cannot be projected. Without power, your vision has no influence. Without power, your preparation dies silently. And here is the question that will echo until the last part. Are you ready to abandon the need to be loved and finally build the sovereignty of being respected? You've made it this far, and if you've made it, it's no accident. Most people gave up along the way, preferred to return to the comfort of illusions, preferred to take refuge in ready-made phrases, preferred to believe they already knew enough. But not you. You've navigated the pain of reality, faced uncomfortable truths, faced every provocation and every silence. This means there's a flame within you that refuses to go out. It means that, even without realizing it, your soul was tired of living as a spectator and began to rebel against mediocrity. That's why you're here, reading every word, absorbing every idea, allowing discomfort to become fuel. By now, you've understood that failure is not the enemy, but the most precious piece of information you can collect. You've realized that illusion is a sweet poison that numbs but never strengthens. You've discovered that a brutal vision of reality, however painful, is the only solid foundation for any true achievement. You've learned that virtue is more powerful than fortune, that discipline and adaptation are the only way to master the world's unpredictability. You've understood that power is not a burden, but a tool, and that without it, all knowledge remains sterile. Now, in this final step, you must learn to build your armor. Not an armor of steel, but of silence, strategy, and selectivity. Because the naivete you've been taught to cultivate is one of the greatest traps there is. Believing that absolute sincerity is a universal virtue is like giving up any protection. It's like entering an arena and announcing your every move to the enemy before the fight begins. How many times have you revealed your plans too early and seen others execute them before you? How many times have you exposed your vulnerabilities, believing it would generate empathy, but only given yourself ammunition to be attacked? How many times have you opened your life like a transparent book only to discover that someone was underlining the very pages that could be used against you? This is the hardest lesson of all. Total transparency isn't strength, it's exposure. This doesn't mean lying. It doesn't mean deceiving. It doesn't mean abandoning integrity. It means learning to manage information like you manage treasure. You don't hand over gold to any stranger you meet. Likewise, you shouldn't hand over your mind, your plans, your fears, your intentions to anyone who hasn't proven worthy of your trust. A man of power is selective. He reveals when it's strategic to reveal and conceals when it's essential to conceal. He reveals only what strengthens his image and withholds what would put him at a disadvantage. And maybe this is the key that's been missing in your life. Maybe you're tired of feeling like you always give more than you receive, that you always open up and are never reciprocated, that you always trust and are always disappointed. This isn't bad luck. It's a misguided strategy. You weren't betrayed just because the other person was cruel, but because you were too naive. The world won't change because you decide to be transparent, but you can change how you protect yourself, and that makes all the difference. Ask yourself, how many people know more about your life than they should? How many know your weaknesses? How many have access to what you should keep secret? The answer may be uncomfortable, but in that discomfort lies your next step. Starting today, you must learn to be both a lion and a fox. A lion when you need to intimidate, a fox when you need to escape. Strong enough to not be challenged, cunning enough to never be caught in a trap. This is where your armor begins to form, an invisible armor, made of self-control and selectivity. An armor that doesn't keep you from the world, but allows you to walk in it without being hurt at every step. You don't need to say everything. You don't need to explain everything. You don't need to react to every provocation. Sometimes silence is your sharpest weapon. Sometimes apparent calm hides the coldest calculation. Sometimes feigning ignorance is the best way to mislead those who underestimate you. This isn't the art of deception, it's the art of survival. And think about it. Isn't that exactly what you've always lacked? Wasn't it precisely early exposure that caused you to lose so many times? Wasn't it precisely overconfidence in those who didn't deserve it that left you with scars? Now you have the chance to fix that. Now you have the chance to be more strategic, more selective, more impenetrable. Imagine what your life would be like if no one could predict your moves. If every person who tried to use you was met with a wall of calm and silence. If every provocation was met not with emotional outbursts, but with calculated looks. Imagine how your presence would change if everyone around you understood that they don't know your cards, that they don't know your intentions, that they don't have access to your weaknesses. This is the moment when you stop being a target and become a hunter. And here's the final revelation. You don't have to shout to be heard. You don't have to expose yourself to be noticed. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. True power isn't loud, it's quiet. It's not displayed, it's projected. It's not declared, it's felt. Those who understand this will never again beg for respect. They will never again despair of approval. They will never again put themselves in a position of gratuitous vulnerability. From now on, every defeat you face will not be a verdict, but a given. Every criticism will not be poison, but study material. Every silence you choose to maintain will not be cowardice, but strategy. You will gradually become a master of your own destiny, and not because the world has become more just, but because you have learned to use every piece, every move, every failure to your advantage. Perhaps at this moment you feel a strange weight, as if a lifetime of beliefs were being demolished within you. It's normal. It's a sign that change has already begun. When the walls of your inner prison crumble, the first impact is emptiness. But this emptiness isn't fear, it's space. Space to build a new mindset, a new attitude, a new identity. And from that moment on, there's only one question to answer. What will you do with this freedom? Will you hide behind comfortable illusions again? Or will you take the risk of becoming the protagonist of your own story? Will you continue to hope that the world will be fair? Or will you accept the brutal discipline of being fair only to your own principles? Will you continue to demand love? Or will you begin to earn the respect that no one can take away? This is the pact you need to make now. The pact to no longer be a victim of circumstances. The pact to no longer hand over your weapons to those who don't deserve them. The pact to transform every fear into fuel, every failure into a learning experience, every scar into a symbol of strength. The pact to never again beg for what you can achieve through the strength of your presence. If you've made it this far, it's because you already know there's no turning back. Once your eyes open, they can never close again. Once you see the brutality of reality, you can never again be fooled by the sweetness of illusions. Once you discover the power of silence, you'll never again waste energy on useless explanations. And that's precisely why this closing isn't an end, but a beginning. The beginning of your new posture, your new discipline, your new way of existing. You already have the tools. You already know that failure is information, that illusion is poison, that reality is a weapon, that virtue conquers fortune, that power demands respect, that silence is protection. Now all that's left is to act. So I invite you to prove that you're not just a spectator here, but someone ready to rebel against mediocrity. Like this video, comment below, even anonymously if you prefer, and subscribe to the channel. This gesture isn't just support. It's your first declaration of war against the old version of yourself. It's a symbol that you've understood the message and decided to act. The mind is the fortress. Protect it, discipline it, strengthen it. Because in the end, the only prison that exists is the one you build within it, and the only key is in your hands.